welcome back to the Guillemot Kayaks Workshop. I'm Nick Schade, and Bill and I are working on building the Petrel Play SG Stitch and Glue Sea Kayak Kit from Chesapeake Lightcraft. This is a kayak I designed. You may have seen my series on building the Petrel Play, which is a strip-built boat. This is the exact same design, however, the construction method is different. So in that boat, we built the boat out of strips of Western red cedar, where this kit is 4mm Akume plywood, and Chesapeake Lightcraft pre-cuts all the panels to the specific shapes they need to be, so the geometry works out and makes the shape of the boat that I designed. So far in this series, we've done an unboxing, we've assembled the hull, we've filleted and fiberglassed the inside of the hull, and we are currently working on the deck. In the last episode, we finished up stitching up the deck, and in this episode, we'll remove the wires and then fillet. And then in the next episode, we will go ahead and fiberglass the inside of the deck. So we are filleting the inside of the deck in this episode. That will be the primary task. Back in one of the early episodes, episode 4 something, I believe we did the filleting on the inside of the deck. I'm going to spend a little bit more time with Bill on sort of making good quality fillets. When we worked on the hull, I was more concentrated in just sort of getting it done. In this case, I decided to slow it down a little bit and really delve into the fillets with a little bit more detail. So I hope you find this useful. So again, this episode is actually the last part of one day, where previously we assembled the deck, putting in the wires and stitching things up, and I think we did the spot welding in the previous episode. And this day was actually at least a month ago, and I am having trouble. I could go back and look at the previous videos and figure out what we did this day. It's important to note that we're on episode 10 or 11 here, and we're only on the 4th day or so. So even though there's a lot of episodes and it looks like it's a really long, drawn-out project, it's really going very quickly if you compare it to my strip build projects. To get this far in a strip build project would take several weeks of actual in-the-shop work, where here it's several days of in-the-shop work, and then weeks and weeks of me editing it down into reasonable size episodes. So most of the time I've spent on this series has actually been sitting at my desk in front of the computer editing. I've spent much less time working on the boat than I have on editing the videos. And my reason for spending that time is my goal on this whole series is a deep dive into the process of building this boat. And honestly, my previous videos have all been just documenting what I'm doing for somebody else. In this case, what I'm doing is for you guys to see the process, and for people who want to build a stitch and glue boat, this will provide a really in-depth look into the whole process and really delve into each step of the process in a lot more detail than I have in my previous videos with the strip built boat, where those videos I hope are instructional but really don't go into the amount of detail I'm going to in this series of videos. So enough of me talking, let's get straight to the building and get back to where we left off in the previous episode. So let's go ahead and just pull the wires out, and that's just a matter of clipping and pulling them out. And if you see a place where things pop apart because you haven't spot welded it sufficiently, take care of it now. Do remember we want to leave these top wires into the forms in place. There is a wire here in the middle of form 4 and form 3 here. We'll keep that wire in as well. So the wires into the forms we leave in place. This is a situation where I might go to a time lapse.
Yeah, I've noticed that it is easy to cut the non-twisted side of the wire.
Yeah, trying to pull a twist through the hole is almost impossible.
Right.
So you can see down here there's still a little bit of twist remaining in this foredeck bit.
but it doesn't take a lot of force to straighten that out. So when we go to put that on the hull, that should straighten right out.
Even with the glass on there.
Even with the glass, we're just going to have glass on the inside before we put the deck on, so the glass will not be out on the outside. So that it should be plenty flexible enough to deal with that. If not, well, we'll find out soon enough. Okay, welcome back to the Guillemot Kayaks Workshop. We've just taken a break for lunch. The deck is all spot welded together. We did wiring and spot welding before lunch. And now we are going to fill it, and we'll see if we get to glassing today. Let's see, a couple of things that will happen before we fill it is we have some convex seams here with glue on the outside edge there. We're going to take and sand that back and give these corners a bit of a radius, just so the glass is going to be able to get around that easily. And so we're going to do some more of that. Then we'll dive into the filleting. Before we do that, I got a care package from Chesapeake Lightcraft, so we can do a little bit more, look at what they've sent us. And this is stuff that they have available for if you're doing boat building stuff. We've been using the CA glue all along. This is CLC branded CA glue, cyanoacrylate. Basically, it's super glue along with the accelerant. We've been using that all along. Oh, we've got, for today, we've got the filleting tools. I mentioned this the other day when we were filleting the inside of the hull, and I often use a spoon, which works pretty well, but they've got a whole variety of different things that will fit into different sizes. If you want a large radius fillet, use that one. All the way down to a small radius. So these are something, if you're doing a lot of filleting, can really come in handy. What else we got in here? They sell the squeegees, little plastic applicators. Use this for cleaning up the fillets and spreading epoxy. So if you need those, they have that sort of stuff. I'll try and put some links up over here someplace to these things to get them from CLC. The piping bags, the cake decorating bags that we use on the fillets, they sell this. If you have trouble finding them, they have them. I got admonished by CLC for using the hot dog rollers. They have these foam rollers that are really good. These are a little bit long for our use, so we end up cutting them in half with a bandsaw or whatever, just to make a half length. And so they have those along with the requisite roller frame. So if you have the half width one, this roller frame works well. And that's good for spreading epoxy. Oh, they sent a couple sweatshirts. If you need a sweatshirt, you got a sweatshirt? Which one do you want?
Take the blue one.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. What else have we got in here? These are foam brushes. So I don't use the foam brushes right away. They'll be useful when we come to do varnishing. My go-to tool for varnishing are these foam brushes. And Gen Manufacturing makes these. You can get foam brushes at the big box store, but they tend to be fairly lousy. This is a fine foam. It's got a plastic stiffener inside the brush. These foam brushes are really great for varnishing. The foam brushes, they're pretty cheap. You can throw them out, which I know it's wasteful, but the amount of turpentine it takes to clean out a good quality brush probably makes up for the amount of plastic in the foam brush. Something I use a lot of is these chip brushes for spreading epoxy, etc. So I think that's all in the care package here. So, you remember the process for filleting?
Well, we mix the epoxy and use a particular method you use with your one pump,
Yep.
rather than doing a bunch of pumps at once. And then you have to thicken it with the
wood flour.
Wood flour, that was it.
All right.
And that was just a kind of art to that.
Yeah, so we'll have a little bit more chance to practice that. And Before we get to the fillets, let's sand these corners. So it's the outside corners. We're trying to put a bit of a radius, get rid of some of the glue spooge out there, and make sure that these, any place we had the puzzle joints put together, we've got a nice smooth surface on that. So all the way around the hatches, combing, and the puzzle joints. So you can be somewhat aggressive with that. If we need sharper sandpaper, we can get it.
You're not trying to remove any wood though, just the glass.
Well, you can round over the wood a bit. It's
little bit.
Yeah, it's okay to round that over. So I got 60 grit on there. Here, I don't know what's on there. Looks like 80 or something. So you want a bit of a radius on these corners. The glass has got to go around that. So it will take a little bit of sanding into the wood. So you have a bit of a radius there.
Are we doing the same here?
Yep. Yeah, so my judge of if it's sanded is, do I feel any sharp edges?
Oh, okay.
Just running my hand over it. So like this, it feels a little sharp there.
Yep.
And there's a little bit of glue there.
Bumpiness.
Yeah. And, so having some good coarse sandpaper can help in this sanding box. I want a nice round over it. Your reaction that you don't want to over sand is very common.
Right.
And part of the reason I use a fairly coarse sandpaper is to really do some damage quickly. But there's no way you're going to sand through this in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I'll see when the first layer is gone.
Yeah, and my basic process for sanding is often I'll start with just sort of putting a chamfer on it, like at a 45, halfway between, and then take and round that over. So if I make a 1/4 inch wide flat spot and then round that over, I figure I've got a pretty good round over it. Yeah, that's good right there. So the next thing we'll do after when we finish this is just vacuum it out, get rid of all that dust. And we'll look for wires caught down in the seam.
How about these little things? Do we have to
I'm not worried about, so there's little tabs on the inside diameter of the hatch here. Those will be dealt with later on. We don't need to worry about those. So I had somebody comment about how rickety this cardboard workbench is. And yeah, I've got better workbenches I could work on. I've got some rolling tables over here I could roll out that are really good hard surfaces. Lots of people have lots of equipment that they can use, but there's a lot of people that don't have a big workbench. And so part of my goal here was to show you don't need sophisticated stuff here. A little bit of cardboard can work as a work surface. And, it's a little bit rickety, but when it's all covered with epoxy, it won't bother me at all. Okay, so we've got all the dust cleaned out. Let's go ahead and mix up some epoxy, mix up the fillet mix. And again, we want it in the consistency of some sort of soft peanut butter. Stiff enough to stay in place, but soft enough to be something we can spread.
And so how much did you want to mix at a time to?
Again, let's start with small batches. So like a 1/2 inch at the bottom of this mixing cup of epoxy. Make sure it comes all the way up.
It is slow to come up, isn't it?
Yep. And just to remind people, the drill with epoxy is one pump to one pump, and these pumps are presumably calibrated.
All right, so you got a good half inch there now.
All right, you've matched your pump for pump.
Yep.
So you were starting on the red pump and finishing on the blue pump?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So again, just to remind people, we want to fully mix the epoxy before adding the wood flour.
You said it's about a minute that you recommend?
Yeah, a minute's a good amount of time. Good vigorous stirring. Wipe down the sides, dig into the corners.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's probably good. Probably want some gloves on also. And then we want the wood flour. Wood flour, again, you can get this from CLC if you need it.
Oh, a couple?
Yeah, start with a couple, see how it goes. And there is an art to how much you want, so start conservative and mix in a little bit at a time until you get what you want. You don't want to spend too much time with the mixing just because the stuff is starting to cure, but you have time, especially in a cold shop like this.
Start low and go slow. That's still pretty thin.
Yeah, very thin. We're still not even at the honey stage.
We're almost there, but not quite.
Yeah, it's getting close. It still has some gloss to it and still falls off the stirring stick, but it's getting close.
Yeah, I forgot what you. That was one of the key things last time was the gloss going off it.
Yeah, you know, it still flows, but it doesn't just pour off of there. So that's good. We've got one of the pastry bags from Chesapeake Light Craft here. Again, I like to put it down into a cup, get the edges pulled down. That way you don't get schmoo all over the edges of that. And now transfer the schmutz into that. Take it out of the cup and get it down into the bag. And then you want a 1/4 inch tip on it.
See, that's beautiful.
And you know, if you cut it small, you can look at how much you're getting out of it and decide whether it's good. See, you know, that's probably a good size right there. We are going to distribute this down all the seams around the cockpit and hatches. And we want to inject it into that seam a bit and then have enough that we can make a nice fillet on it.
And how long do you have to work with this?
In your hot hand, you know, 10 to 15 minutes. And it depends, again, on temperature of your shop. We probably have more here today. That's good. Feel free to run the tip right into that groove.
I'll get it right in there.
Yeah, so you're injecting it into the groove.
All right.
And yeah, then get that, there you go, nice pile up. So just, I'd get the whole bag out onto the boat. Now you're starting to get a feel for it. Do make sure you have enough that you can actually create a fillet. The sharper the corner, the more material you need. Make sure you're down in the corner. That's one reason to have it ride in the groove.
So you probably want a lot.
Yeah, it'll take a lot in that spot.
Is that enough?
For now, yeah.
It's about getting all this in.
You're never going to get it all out, but being fairly efficient with it is good. Yeah, I find twisting the bag
Oh,
down against your left, you know, what's remaining there, so it's tight against there. Because if you just sort of roll it down, it wants to unroll, where the twist is a little bit more solid. This looks good. Here, Bill really got in the groove and was going down fast. Might not be quite enough epoxy in there. We'll find out when we go to fillet it. We've got these filleting tools from CLC, or you can use a plastic spoon. And there's a bunch of different radiuses on these. So sort of, this is kind of a good spatula for spreading things. And then you have a nice radius there. And then the biggest radius is this. On a boat this size, basically with this fillet, we want to maintain the original thickness of the plywood through the fillet. So if we've got 4mm plywood here, we want the final thickness of the boat here to still be 4mm. And we're going to round over these edges a little bit on the outside of the boat, the same way we did these edges here, just so the glass conforms. So this is a long way of saying you want a bit of a radius there, but you don't need a huge radius. If I were to do this, that's a pretty good size. That's not a bad size for that. But you could probably also get away with something like that. So you see the difference there. So this is, call that a 1-inch radius, and this a 1/2-inch radius. I'd say in this area, this radius is probably a little bit better, but that would be fine. And again, when we're doing this, so let's go ahead and do a run with this just to see what that looks like. And I like, again, to do it in one long pull. And we're having the side interfere with us. So we got a little sparse in that fillet. Okay, now this radius up in this corner, not doing it at all. So if I were to run over here, see it doesn't even hit the epoxy. Where if I were to switch over to this one, I still get a nice 1/2-inch wide fillet there. This sharper corner doesn't need as big a radius on the filleting tool. Now I'm getting down into the next section, and this fillet's starting to get a little bit narrower as the angle between the two panels opens up. I could switch over to the bigger radius tool. And it's still not quite reaching in there. So let's go ahead. Continue with this down in there and see how this does. If I get too much buildup on the tool, it can make a mess elsewhere. So that's making a nice fillet down there. It's not going to fit in between those parts there. So it can come across here with this. And then see, it's making a nice radius between those tight parts there. But I might switch back to this as it flattens out a bit. So this stuff that I've scraped out, that's all good stuff. If there's a sparse spot, I could try to smear this in, but I find it's easier to put this back in the bag and dispense it from the bag than it is. But let's mix up some more epoxy and then add this stuff back into that epoxy. And when we load up the next bag, we'll add this into that next batch. So a reminder, Bill is using the same mixing cup that we mixed the original batch of filleting mix into. So there's already epoxy in there, but it's still soft. He'll dispense the epoxy in there, mix it up thoroughly, and then incorporate the pre-mixed stuff in there and whatever's left over from dragging out the seams. Yeah, we did not quite half the boat with that first batch. We've got the same long seam to do, a little bit of center seam, and around the combing and hatches.
But you wouldn't try to do all of that in one batch?
I wouldn't recommend it. If you're really experienced with this, then you know how quickly you can go and how much you can mix up at a time. You don't have that experience yet. This whole process, you're going to be better at this at the end of it than you were at the beginning of it. And so don't expect perfection the first time you go through it. You know, these fillets look good. I'd say the CLC tools, because there's those different radiuses, are kind of nice. Might do a little bit more predictable job than the spoon.
Right.
It's up to you what you like. And then once you get that mixed up, you can take this blort and stick it back in there. Scrape that off. There we go. So he's mixed up the epoxy thoroughly, then added what's the leftovers from the last batch, and now he's adding more wood flour to get the whole thing thickened up to the consistency he needs. And he's a little bit more experienced now, or at least he thinks he is. He's adding more wood flour in on the first go than he did last time.
Not much more. All right, ready for some more. Still gooey. Batch is a little smaller.
That looks good, yeah. It still flows a bit. It doesn't just drip off. But to keep the stuff from squeezing back at you, twist the end here, and now you can hold it like that.
Yeah, and that's where I was getting in trouble. But
Right.
couldn't make it squeeze easily.
Yeah, but so by having that twist up there, you can, get it contained.
And then you can do it one-handed, so you
Yeah.
can see what you're doing.
Right, so you can go like this.
Yep.
So,
So it's a lot easier to manipulate the bag when you use that twist method, because the bag doesn't get all soft.
you got some gaps in there.
Oh yeah.
All right, it's nice. Yeah, let's go ahead and just spread. That's going to spread it that way with what you've got there. See how far it goes. Don't be afraid of actually pushing on the boat. You seem to be wanting to glide it above everything.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and touch it. You see this white line on either side?
Yeah, I do.
We want that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's from doing house carpentry. When I do caulking, I have a light touch.
Yeah, so we want this light spot here. We are eventually going to come by and clean up the excess here. And if you don't have that white spot, you don't know where the excess is.
Okay.
You want that nice flat spot there.
Just like that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And you say you like to try to do it in one continuous motion?
Let's look at that fillet there. How's that compare to like this fillet here?
It has much less volume.
Yeah, and so I think that is sufficient, but I'd like it a little bit wider. So how do you make it wider?
By making this thicker.
No,
No.
no. That's just going to make that stuff thicker.
Okay.
It's not going to, the geometry of your,
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm using this, the diameter of this
Right,
is
so-
just too small.
yeah, so the diameter of this tool versus the diameter of this, that's what's controlling how wide that fillet is there. Try going back there and with that same, don't do anything, just use that same tool and go back over the same thing again, see what that looks like.
It's not changing it because it's not hitting it.
But it's taking some of that excess that was
Yep.
squeezed out the side and now continue on down the line.
Now it's making a better fillet.
All right, now what happens?
Now it's too small.
All right, so the radius of that is too small in this area, and so it's not reaching down to the fillet. So now try the smaller tool, see how that goes.
There we go. Now we're ready.
ready to go back up to the big one, I guess, hey?
Give it a try.
A little too soon, huh?
Possibly, but you know, that's a nice looking fillet right now. All right, so now we're getting into this tight section again. Let's say you only have one tool. The radius of that affects how wide your fillet is here. What can you do to change the apparent radius of the tool as you're drawing that out? Let's say you have a small radius and you want it to act like it was a larger radius. What would you do?
By the different angles you hold it at,
Right.
you can affect the radius.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're holding it like this, you get the true radius of the tool. Where if you hold it like this, it's as if the radius is a lot larger. So that's one way you can adjust things as you go to maintain a nice looking fillet there.
We probably want to go back to the big one, eh?
Well, wipe by, see what happens with it. And it looks like it cleaned it up nice.
Oh, this is a tricky spot.
So what do you think about all of this up there?
I think it's okay.
Yeah, that's good. It's perfect. We want to fill that in and get a nice smooth surface in there. So that's ideal.
Okay, cool. Now what about like right in here? That's all good?
Yeah, I'm actually going to have you later on fill this in even more.
Okay. So
Because we talked about some of the cracks under here when we were spot welding this together. And on my prototype boat, I have sort of a big finger notch on the side of this when it's right side up to help let the water drain out of this cavity. And I make that by having a big fillet here and then sanding deeply into that fillet.
I see, okay. Now I've noticed that along here, we do have some thin spots where the fillet is thin.
Yep.
What do you do about going back over that?
Let's find an example.
All right. There was one here.
So we have a place in here where there wasn't quite enough of the schmutz to create a good fillet there. You could come back in with your gloppy up tool and try and get some in there. But this isn't a very good tool for precisely dispensing something. And that cleans it up okay. But I find it a lot easier to, instead of trying to smear it in with a big spatula or something, to just next time you have the piping bag full of material, pipe in a little bit there and come back and go over it again. Okay. The thing you do want to also be aware of is this will not have nice results where you're trying to push at it. We want to take and make a nice scrape over the whole thing, and that'll make it nice and smooth. So when we were doing the hull, we came by and wiped it down with alcohol on the finger of our glove. That works, but it's another step that if we can avoid that step by laying down a good fillet initially, we won't need to do.
Right. Time saver.
Yep. All right, so I'd say we could mix up another smaller batch. We still have the back hatch, the combing, and the front hatch to deal with. That won't take as much as we've used already, but another small batch would be good. Yeah, we can always mix up more epoxy, but it's just a waste of it if we mix too much. So you got epoxy on my floor, you bastard.
Oh no, I'm fired.
So Bill just added the wood flour to the unmixed hardener and resin. That's, it's an easy thing to do, and you would think it's not that big a deal, but there's the potential that you've got one grain of wood flour that falls in the hardener, another grain of wood flour that falls in the resin, and they soak up a little bit of each. That means that when those two grains of wood flour meet each other, the material that they contain doesn't fully mix together. So you really want to fully mix the resin and hardener before you add the wood flour. So in this case, we'll do what Bill just did, toss that one away, mix up a little bit more.
Right after I did it, I was like,
That's a very useful thing for me to be able to put in the video.
yeah, because I can see, I would be tempted to use that.
Yeah,
I would be,
yeah. And, you know, frankly, it's probably okay.
right?
But is it worth it? Right.
Why risk it? Yeah.
That's a very useful thing for me to be able to put in the video.
Yeah, because I can see, I
would be
tempted to use that.
Yeah,
I would be.
yeah. And, you know, frankly, it's probably okay.
Right?
But is it worth it? Right.
Why risk it?
Yeah.
So about the same amount of material you want here is on the side?
Yeah, yeah, you know, we're trying to create the same kind of fillet.
Okay.
Find it easy if I pull it towards me.
Watch the bag doesn't mess up your fillets. And how much is it going to take to fill that up?
Not much.
Yeah. All right, and now we still have some left in there. And again, I'd like to make a nice finger hole here. I'm gonna put a big amount there on both sides.
Oh, both sides.
Well, it doesn't have to be. This is, you don't need to do this at all, but
You like it?
it's a thing that you can do. And then shape that into, let's see, maybe with, I don't want so much in there that it just weighs a lot. But I would like enough in there that I can sand right down into it.
How big a hole are you making? What did you say, about the size of your finger?
Yeah, you know, it might be sort of the size of the end of this stick, an
Oh, okay.
inch in diameter, something like that. So, make that a nice smooth shape there. And likewise on the other side. And, you know, it helps that drain out of there. We might work on that a little bit more, but you know, let it stiffen up a little bit. So we've got the beads of material we just laid down that we want to shape. So probably on here it's a nice flat one. So we want the large, probably large, yeah. Yeah, it's not going to leave much. That's such a shallow angle.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful.
So I started this with the big one, but it is apparently too big.
Yeah, that's a pretty hefty fillet in there. Try the smaller one. That's beautiful looking. So if the fillet's like the 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch wide, I think that's going to be pretty good for most kayaks. Other boats, bigger boats, you want a bigger fillet, but a lightweight boat like this, that's probably plenty. All right, that looks nice. Here we have a little bit of a spot where it's a little sparse. I'm going to just take and pipe in a little bit there, and if Bill goes through with that larger radius tool. There, thing of beauty. So there's a spot right by Bill's finger that's a little sparse. It doesn't look bad, that would probably be fine, but we can just put a little bit in there. And you see how he lifts up the tool while he's moving to make a nice smooth edge to it. And the last one we have to do is the seam back here.
Transition doesn't look so great, does it?
Yeah, it takes a little practice. So now we want to take this squeeze out. So again, if we have a nice bright spot between the fillet and the excess, we can run the edge of our squeegee right down along that line. And so we Angle the squeegee so it's lifting up like a plow and taking the stuff away from the fillet and running the corner right down in that light spot. And now we have a nice clean fillet there. So you see, we're getting rid of all that excess stuff, and by having that light spot in between, we've got a wide place in order to run the corner of the squeegee. We don't need to come anywhere near the good fillet itself as we're taking out that excess. Beautiful.
So some of this is pretty clean already, actually.
Yeah, and you can get, with experience, you get calibrated in how much you need to lay down into the seam with the piping bag so you don't end up with any squeeze out when you're done.
Yeah, I can see how you could get accustomed to how much you need. It's just a matter of the angle, where the angles come together.
So you see what was going on in that section there?
I dug into the fillet.
Why was it hard to not dig into the
There was no white space.
Right, so the pressure as you went by there was not enough to really press the filleting tool down against both surfaces. So you didn't leave that light stripe that you want.
And you'll fix that with alcohol on your finger?
Well, we could just,
It's pliable enough.
yeah, we could just come by here, make a second pass and see what that does.
Simple.
So here we have that situation where that bright line on the side of the fillet sort of disappears because there wasn't enough pressure on the tool. So we'll come back and run it again.
Oh, yeah, it's all
And
about the pressure.
Yeah, and so now a nice, smooth, continuous curve there. And we have that bright line to clean up.
You can just go right around it.
Beautiful.
Nice, nice. Look at that.
Thing of beauty.
It is.
You know, if you do need to come back and put some more in someplace, it's permitted. Oops. For tight spots, a little plastic tool like this or a tongue depressor with square end can get into some of those tighter spots where it's a little harder to reach in with the spatula.
So the reason we want this so smooth on the edges is so the fiberglass will lay down nice and flat.
Right, yeah. And I think today we'll call it a day before we put the fiberglass on. It's just getting late and we're going to be tired. Let's do the fiberglassing while we're fresh. Okay. If we went ahead right now with the fiberglass, the fillet's still soft. Yep. And so we could lay that down and the fillet would conform to the fiberglass and the fiberglass would conform to the fillet and it would be nice and smooth fairly easily. We would need to be careful that we don't damage the fillet with our squeegee as we're scraping off excess. Okay. But if we let it harden now, any little ripple in the fillet here, the fiberglass has to conform over. Okay. So we'd like to make it so that it's as smooth as possible. Right. Otherwise, we might have to sand away at that to make it smoother. Yep. We're going to have to sand anyways just to take some of the gloss off and get a little bit of a mechanical bond with the epoxy to the existing fillet. I think it's worth going through that process so people see what that's like as opposed to what we did in the hull where we just laid it directly in. We'll do a final cleanup, and I think we'll do a little bit with the denatured alcohol. Just if there's any sort of lumps that are hard to get rid of with the squeegee, we can come in with the alcohol on the tip of our finger. And again, if we pull the glove tight, any sort of lumpy stuff we can blend in nicely with that wet finger. So in some of the tricky places to clean everything out, we'll get it all nice and smooth with the finger. All right, so here we have some roughness in here. We could probably finesse that with the squeegee a little bit, but with a little alcohol in the finger, let's see what that looks like. So that smooths it right out. You don't want too much pressure, otherwise you'll just scrape all the stuff out of there and make other lumps.
Yeah, you got to be kind of gentle with it.
Yeah, we're just sort of smoothing it. We're not trying to drastically shape it. So that's the idea.
All right.
So we want sort of a pile right here.
Right about where that black mark is?
Yeah, right at the widest point. There we go. Yeah. And your finger needs to be a little bit wet in order for it to really do the thing. Yeah, that's starting to pull it out of there. Let's see. So we'll make a pile there. So not doing a lot of pressure, just enough to sort of
Build it up.
pile it up in there.
All right.
And get rid of some of the goobers. All right, so like goobers down in here, those were hard to get with the squeegee, so just wipe them out.
Is that right?
That looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And imagine the fiberglass laying on that. Is there going to be pockets where it can't reach into, or there'll be sort of lumps that it's going to have to bridge over?
Pretty good.
Yeah, that looks good. All right, so then we'll just sort of do an inspection, and any little thing that sticks up can be wiped down. There's some little gaps in these puzzle joints. I'm just going to put a little bit in there to fill those. So today we finished the stitching, spot welded with the super glue, and then came in with the fillets. I was thinking we might get to the fiberglassing today, but it's probably just as well we put that off to a separate day, let ourselves come in, do that when we're a bit refreshed, and show you guys the difference between laying the glass in a wet fillet versus laying the glass on a dry fillet. It's not like it's a huge difference. You do have to do a little bit of sanding. Anything from today that struck you, Bill?
Well, once again, with the wires, putting a little kink in them to draw them close. With the fillets, the whole process, I made the mistake with the putting the flour in before I mix the...
Yeah, it's an easy mistake to make. You sort of get on auto mode, and you think, okay, I got to get the wood flour in there, and then you just do it before it's ready.
And then with this, using the different tools. Last time we just used a spoon. This time we use the different radius tools, and how you would use the larger ones for the flatter surface and the smaller ones for the more acute surfaces. And then the angle of the blade can affect the radius of the...
And how about how much pressure you're putting down on the tool?
Right. At first I was being very soft touch, and it wasn't giving us the white stripes on either side because I was just laying it right down in the bead. But when you put that pressure on, it spreads it and gives you the white stripes so you can remove it.
And and that's sort of to me, the white stripes are actually kind of a side effect. We're trying to get it pressed into that gap.
Right.
And so by putting the pressure on to get it pushed into that gap, we're also ending up with the tool hard down against the material on either side. So we're getting, and it's hitting a tangent on that curve of the tool. And then it happens to be that the excess gets pushed farther out to the side and leaves that gap that makes it easier to clean up the mess. I didn't talk too much today about the technique of bending the tool to fit in there. We could have done that, but you do need to be careful with that you don't pull out too much of the filleting mix. So I think we're in a good place to do glassing in the next episode. One thing I'd like to remind people of, right now we're building the Petrel Play SG. These techniques that we're using work for any stitch and glue kayak or larger boat. You can use them if you're building a dory or whatever. As far as my designs go, the kits, we have the Petrel Play. I have a large Petrel Play that CLC makes a kit for, and then there's the standard Petrel, the 17-foot version. Those kits are all very much the same steps. They have the recessed hatches, and my instructions for this boat would be almost identical for those other boats, and any other of my designs would have a lot of the same processes in them. My brother's designs, the shear waters and the wood ducks from CLC, his process is a little bit different. They come out great. So just because I do it this way and my brother Eric does it a different way doesn't mean that mine's better, which, being the younger brother, my way is always better. But whatever works. CLC has a nice series on building one of their Chesapeakes, I believe it is, one of their other designs with John Harris, and he has his way of doing things. And it's worthwhile to look at how different people do it and find what works for you and your style of work. I have my ways and other people do it differently. Don't think that because I said this is the way to do it that it's the only way to do it, because there's lots of ways to do it. So again, we will be glassing in the next episode. If you're interested in seeing that, hit notifications, turn on the notifications, subscribe so you see all these videos. I've putting together a playlist of this whole series. You can see that. Hit like, that helps the visibility of my videos, which the more visibility they get, more people that watch them, the better return I get on my effort for making these videos. And if you want to support directly the production of these videos, my Patreon site goes towards equipment and so forth for making these videos, and all that stuff helps a lot. I do these to help you guys see the process, and I hope it interests some of you in building a boat. And if you want to build yourself a boat, CLC has the kits for this and a bunch of other designs. I have plans for this and a bunch of other designs, and that's a great way to support me, is buy a set of plans or buy a kit. So once again, thanks for watching and happy paddling.